Doctor Strange is releasing soon, and it will heavily feature Wanda, who has fully realized that she is now the Nexus Being Scarlet Witch. On top of that, WandaVision was a huge success on Disney+, so we are glad to see more of her. She made her first debut in 1964's X-Men #4, and boy, I gotta tell you, the Scarlet Witch is the most confusing character in Marvel. Her powers have varied in each representation. Her past has a huge pool of inconsistent information. Her mental state is always in flux. Good lord, can we keep it consistent for once? Regardless of all that, none of it has held Wanda Maximoff back as she became a movie and TV star in her own right. Since she first appeared in the live-action world in the post-credit scene in 2014's Captain America the Winter Soldier, alongside her brother QuickSilver, not the cool brand from the early 2000s, she has become a major part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She did start out as an enemy to the heroes, similar to the comics, but soon enough, Scarlet became one of the most powerful members of the Avengers. And while she is a character from the comics, that didn't stop the MCU from making a large amount of changes to her character. Join us as we dive a bit deeper and explore some of the many changes Scarlet Witch endured throughout her MCU career. Let's go! In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Scarlet Witch's origin story seems to be pretty simple. Scarlet and her brother Pietro were captured by Hydra agents, and were eventually experimented on by Wolfgang von Strucker, who used Loki's scepter, which was powered by the Mind Stone, and that gave the twins powers. Boy, could you imagine explaining that to somebody who has no idea about Marvel? Good God. In the comics, however, Scarlet and her brother's story changed a bunch of times over the years. When they were first introduced to the readers, the siblings were already mutants, but that was later changed, making them inhuman. And then it was changed again when it was revealed that Wanda and Pietro weren't inhuman either, but genetically altered humans, thanks to the High Evolutionary. We don't really know why the story was changed so much, but from what we can gather, it came at the request of the editors for story purposes. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Scarlet comes from the Eastern European country of Sokovia. It is there that the Avengers fought and defeated Ultron, but not before destroying the entire country. By God, you defeated Ultron, but at what cost, people? Sokovia continues to play a major role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with the Sokovia Accords leading to the disbanding of the Avengers. And in WandaVision, her past in Sokovia is mentioned a number of different times. In the wonderful pages of the comic books, however, Scarlet Witch and QuickSilver were born in Serbia as part of a Romani village, not to be mistaken for Romani's ranch in Majora's Mask. Their mother, Natalia, placed the babies under the care of her brother because she was afraid of harming them due to her perilous lifestyle. As children, the twins were taken to Mundagore Mountain and used as experiments by the High Evolutionary, when his crew and him ravaged the village in search of babies to experiment on. And that's the story. Until they change it again. Back to Scarlet Witch's past that has been changed so many times before. In the MCU, Wanda and her brother Pietro were enemies at first because of their feelings about Tony Stark. As explained in Avengers Age of Ultron, Wanda and Pietro watched their parents die. There's gotta be a Bruce Wayne joke in there somewhere. When a missile built by Stark Industries hits their home, a second missile hits their home moments later, but it did not detonate. Instead, a very young Wanda and Pietro lay in the rubble that was once their home, watching the missile blink red lights, hoping they would be saved. In the deep depths of the comic books, Wanda has no past connection to Iron Man or his company. Her reasons for starting off as a villain stem from how they were treated by others in the village when it was believed that the twins were mutants. Jumping back into the MCU, Scarlet has been in one relationship as far as we know. While stuck in the Avengers compound, Scarlet and Vision both became close, and in time, they became lovers. So cute. In the end, however, it was a tragic story, as Scarlet was forced to kill Vision in an attempt to keep the Mind Stone out of the evil, very large hands of Thanos. The TH in Thanos stands for thick. In the comics, it plays out a bit differently. She has had a number of different lovers, and the two that were most important were Vision, who she married and had kids with, and Wonder Man, who died so Vision could live. Although in the comics, Vision and Scarlet divorced, they said their vows alongside Mantis and Swordsman in Giant-Sized Avengers #4, which sounds like a wild ceremony. Also, the MCU is not the first time Scarlet has been adapted for the big screen. Her first real live-action appearance was in the 1994 Iron Man series, and in that show, she was in love with Tony Stark, which is wild because of her hatred for Stark in the comics. She competed for his affection with Spider-Woman, though Scarlet disappeared from the series when it was heavily retooled in Season 2. It's also important to note that Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch developed feelings for each other on Wolverine and the X-Men. Good lord, she's a heartbreaker. Let's jump into something a little easier to track, which would be Scarlet Witch's outfits and looks. Over the years, our sexy Scarlet has had a number of different costumes in the comics, but none of them has been as iconic as her first outfit, which is evidently the longest lasting one. While the red cape and one-piece swimsuit plays a big part in the look, the headgear is what really stands out for us. It looks like a red Burger King crown, and that just made me hungry. Unfortunately for us, that outfit is never shown in the movies. She did, however, wear it for at least a few scenes in WandaVision for a cute little laugh. But in the movies, Scarlet's outfits are a little more toned down, with darker reds and a jacket doing most of the work. Back to our gal's background, let's dig a bit into her mutant background. Go get your shovel. Her mutant background used to be a huge part of her story in the comics. She and her brother were introduced as members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants before they joined the Avengers, and for a time it was believed that their father was none other than the master of magnetism himself, Magneto. Boy, is that neato. The mutant connections to Scarlet and QuickSilver were dropped for the MCU because when the twins made their debut, 20th Century Fox had the rights to Marvel's mutants. QuickSilver even shows up in a number of the X-Men movies. Let's pull up Ancestry.com and check out Scarlet's family tree, shall we? In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Scarlet and Pietro are, as far as we know, the only Maximoffs around. And on top of that, at the end of Age of Ultron, spoiler, Scarlet is left all alone. In the comics, the twins have an extensive family that includes their foster mother Mary and Luminous, who is basically a sister to the twins because she was created using genetic material of Scarlet and Pietro by the High Evolutionary. There is also a new generation of Maximoffs thanks to QuickSilver's daughter Luna. On a sadder note, Scarlet's own children, Billy and Tommy, are dead. Wow, alright. We've talked a lot about Scarlet's brother QuickSilver. Let's dive into him for a bit. We think perhaps the biggest difference in the life of Scarlet Witch between the comics and the movies is that in the comics, Scarlet's brother QuickSilver is still very much alive. While QuickSilver gave his life to save Hawkeye and a child from Ultron, in the comics, he continues to run around being his normal QuickSilver self to his fellow heroes. He even marries the inhuman Crystal, which is where his daughter Luna comes from. You see, kids, when two people that love each other very much, they get together and have so much fun saving the world. This one really got me. I can't believe the Marvel Cinematic Universe ignored all the Mephisto connections from the comics. Let me explain. The overall story of Scarlet creating her children through magic in suburbia has deep roots in the comics. The story seeded the involvement of the demonic Marvel villain Mephisto in the creation of the twins. It gets crazier. It's revealed that Wanda unknowingly used fragments of Mephisto's soul to create Billy and Tommy, Scarlet's kids. WandaVision doesn't involve Mephisto at all, at least not yet. There are, however, a ton of hidden references to Mephisto throughout the series that could set up the future. And finally, we have the differences in her powers in the movies and in the comic books. In the MCU, Scarlet possesses drastically different powers to her comic book counterpart. She is undoubtedly the most powerful of the Avengers. In Avengers Endgame, she went face-to-face, one-on-one with the thick boy himself, Thanos, tearing his armor apart and forcing him to order his Sanctuary 2 ship to bombard the battlefield before he was defeated. This feat is extra incredible when you remember that Thanos had been able to defeat Thor and would have killed the God of Thunder, not Gene Simmons, if it wasn't for Captain America's intervention. In the comics, Scarlet was introduced as a member of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil, as we discussed before. Stan Lee decided to switch things up a bit by having Scarlet and her brother QuickSilver become part of the second wave of Avengers, and since then she has been treated as a superhero. In the comics, Scarlet manipulates a primal force known as Chaos Magic, which affects the nature of reality itself, and at its most basic level, it allows Scarlet to project hex bolts and alter probability in a localized area. Because of these reality warping powers, it made her mentally unstable, and that's so sad. In the MCU, she possesses superhuman strength because of the Mind Stone and both telepathic and telekinetic powers. Although Age of Ultron divided its time equally between both talents, the MCU now almost exclusively is interested in her telekinesis. Meanwhile, just in the comics, there appears to be a link between Scarlet's raw powers and her emotional stability. Thanos learned that one the hard way. The future is looking bright for our beloved Scarlet Witch, and we trust that the MCU has the best intentions for our beloved gal in the future.